Just a word about Saul's conversion. Again, I have written this up elsewhere. I am 3 parts convinced by what a scholar called John Bowker suggested a generation ago, that Saul, as a devout Pharisee, will have been a man of prayer. He will have been somebody who meditated on the scriptures. And one of the great meditation traditions of the time was the meditation on the throne chariot of Ezekiel. Ezekiel chapter 1, the whirling wheels and all the rest of it. And if you think about this as a possible scenario, I'm not saying it must have been like this, but if you think about it, it shows you something of what it would have meant for Paul. That he's perhaps jogging along on his horse, it's a hot day, the sun is near its height at noon, and he is praying, meditating on the throne chariot. Because the point of meditating on the whirling wheels and the chariot is in case God will allow you in his grace to go up from the throne chariot, from the wheels to the chariot itself, and then from the chariot to the one who is sitting on the chariot. And you know, Ezekiel describes this vision where you see the legs and the loins and the body and then the face. And Paul is meditating on this chariot. And then in his mind's eye, he starts to see the figure who is sitting on the throne chariot. And then it gets brighter and brighter and more powerful, just as though he was seeing it with his real eyes instead of the eyes of his heart. And then he realizes that he is seeing it with his real eyes and not with the eyes of his heart. And then he gets to the face, and the face is the face of Jesus of Nazareth. And at that point, everything is fulfilled and everything is destroyed. Everything has come to its great climax and everything is absolute rubbish. Both of those simultaneously. He has been absolutely right in being loyal to the God of Israel and absolutely wrong in terms of where the God of Israel is now to be seen and found. Now, as I say, I can't prove that that's what's going on. But there is something again in this vision of Saul of Tarsus, which is about heaven and earth coming together. You know, so often people have deconstructed Paul's conversion as simply a spasm in his own psychology. It was a vision, okay, therefore it was internal, therefore it wasn't real, therefore it was just a religious experience. Phew, that's all right, now we can safely domesticate that because people have all sorts of funny experiences and that's okay. No, Saul of Tarsus, Paul, is quite clear. He saw Jesus with his own eyes, rather as did Stephen just before when he was being stoned to death. The deeply personal meaning indicates the cosmic meaning. Heaven and earth have come together, and the point where they have come together is Jesus of Nazareth. So much more we could say about that, and I'm going to skip right over Peter, the end of chapter 9 through chapter 11. You know it well, the story. But Luke repeats the story. He makes Peter tell the story again when he gets to Jerusalem. Luke does not do this by accident. It's not a very long book, Acts. And if you're writing a book of that length and you've only got certain space on your scroll, to tell the same story at great length twice shows you think it's hugely significant. Like when he then has Paul tell the story of his conversion 2 more times, that's extremely significant. But he really wants you to get hold of the fact that when the gospel went out to the Gentile world, it was Peter who did it, and the reason Peter did it was that God gave him this symbolic vision about clean and unclean foods. Because the point of clean and unclean foods is that that is a boundary marker which separates Israel from the Gentiles and even comes to symbolize Israel and the Gentiles. Israel as the clean ones, Gentiles as the unclean ones. And the vision says, God says in the vision to Peter, what God has cleansed, you must not call common. And if you want to know the origin of the new perspective on Paul, it is in the vision of Peter as he goes to the house of Cornelius, but that's trailing my coat for other discussions elsewhere. And then the result is, the end of chapter 11, the larger extension of the characteristic of the church. What we saw of the church in chapters 2 and 4, that the church is a community which lives by Jubilee, which fulfills Deuteronomy, which says there shall not be a needy person among you. That worked for the community in Jerusalem. Now look, 11:19 to 30, it's now working for the larger universal church, so that when one part of the church is in difficulties, the next part, which can help them out, will send them money. And that goes on into 2 Corinthians and so on. Now, there's a million things we could say after all of this, and I've taken you on a great whistle-stop tour through these amazing chapters, and we end up with chapter 12, with Herod, as I say, vaunting himself over the people of God, and at the end of chapter 12, he is struck down and dies, but, verse 24, the word of God continues to advance and gain adherents. There are all sorts of questions, and it would take a whole other hour to spell them out, I guess, in terms of what they were doing vis-a-vis their culture. That it was fulfilled and yet turned inside out. What would it look like if we were to meditate on all that we've said in terms of where we are as Westerners? Obviously, you can't simply pick up this unique historical moment and transpose it into any old other culture. Nevertheless, there's a huge amount we might conceivably learn.